We got, oh, I forgot that Zoom does that. It tells us that this meeting's being recorded. But yeah, it looks like we've got a few people in the chat from Sparks, Oregon. Awesome. So we got people from all over the place. So this is going to be a part of our Nature Blitz series, is birds of prey identification. And my name is Caitlin, and with me is Amanda. We are both AmeriCorps educators with the Nevada Department of Wildlife, and we're super excited to be here today to kind of talk a little bit more about how to get better at identifying birds, specifically birds of prey. So this can be kind of used interchangeably with the word raptor. The only thing is we're not going to be covering owls in this session. That's actually going to be covered in 2 weeks by the wonderful Jess Brooks, who is a Southern region educator. So she will be doing a wonderful job of talking about owls. So I recommend that you go and check out hers as well. So this is a part of our Nature Blitz event, and if you haven't been keeping track of it, it is a summer event that we do through iNaturalist, and it's a part to be like, it's an opportunity to be a part of citizen science and research. So basically, any observations that you find, you're able to take a picture of and document. We are able, not us specifically, but any scientist who uses iNaturalist is able to use it for their data. So it's super helpful and really awesome for tracking populations. But this is going to be going on through September 15th, so through the rest of summer. And there's going to be opportunities to win different prizes. So we'll have different kind of events every day or every week or so, where you'll be able to do like if you pollinators or whoever gets the most pictures of ducks or different birds and stuff like that. So I recommend you go check it out on our main Facebook page and also our Instagram as well. So today we'll be talking about a few different things. So we're going to start off with some raptor characteristics, so behavioral and physical things to look for in all birds of prey. Then we'll talk specifically about raptors of Nevada, so go through each of them and identify them and kind of talk a little bit about how to get good at identifying those raptors and what to look for. Then we will work on practicing identification together. So this is a really fun opportunity to be able to kind of test your knowledge, test what you learned together as a group. And then lastly, we'll be doing a brief iNaturalist review. So if you don't really know how to use iNaturalist, or maybe you want to learn more, or maybe you have any questions about how to use it, we'll definitely be going over that as well. So if you want to, you can put in the chat. So what is your experience with identifying birds of prey? Would you say you're an expert? Would you say that you really need some work, or maybe you've had a little bit of experience? So go ahead and let us know if you've been able to do a lot, or maybe just a little, or you're completely new. So we got a bit of experience. Awesome. So some people are brand new or beginners. Awesome. So that's great. So no matter who you are, if you've had a little bit of experience, if you're a pro, if you are a total beginner, you can definitely learn a lot from today. Just new tips or tricks, or just maybe something you didn't know about this bird before. So when we're going over characteristics of birds of prey, the physical things are going to be really important, and all of our birds of prey pretty much share these physical characteristics. So first of all, they have excellent eyesight. So their eyesight can be 8 to 10 times better than our own. So this is incredibly important when they're going to be flying up high, looking down at the ground. They can notice changes in patterns or colors. They have a very good attention to detail, and this allows them to be very good hunters. They also have a curved, sharp beak, which is going to be especially useful for puncturing prey and also ripping meat apart. So this is a very essential part of being a bird of prey. They have sharp talons, and these talons are going to help them to grip prey very strongly, especially for some of our birds of prey that have really slippery prey that they go after, like fish. For example, this is going to be incredibly important in being able to grasp onto things and even possibly be a part of killing whatever they're hunting for. They are all carnivorous, so they are going to be eating meat. So pretty much any other animal they can get their hands on. They might have a specific diet, but it is all going to be meat. And lastly, they have these powerful flight wings. So these wings are going to be incredibly important for being able to propel them through the sky, being able to extend out and stay out for long periods of time so that they can ride updrafts and different things like that and circle the sky. And it also helped them get an edge on their speeds. So especially our falcons really use their wings for that advantage when they're going after prey. So they do have some behavioral things that are pretty interesting as well that a lot of birds of prey share. So in many species, females are going to be larger than the males. And this is kind of opposite of what we usually get with sexual dimorphism, which is when we talk about the differences between the sexes. Usually males are larger than females in a lot of species, but it is switched in this species. They're mostly apex predators, so especially our larger hawks, eagles, and larger falcons. Some of our smaller falcons may not always be the apex predators because of their size. They could be maybe a big predator in the area, but there's always a bigger predator, especially when they're maybe only, you know, like probably like this big. So it's really easy to be bigger than that. They're usually a good indicator species of change, especially since they are an apex predator. So when we have any pollutants or any kind of changes in the environment, they're going to concentrate heavily in these apex predators. And that was pretty apparent in some of these birds in like the 80s and 90s when we had the DDT problems that were causing massive population declines in, for example, our peregrine falcons and bald eagles. So we were able to understand that there was a really bad DDT problem because of their diet and because it all got concentrated in these apex predators. So by studying them, we're able to kind of understand a little bit more about what is in the environment and how they're reacting to it. A lot of them are going to hunt from perches. So they're going to use that keen eyesight to target prey from above. So they'll either perch or they'll be flying. But even then, when they kind of come down to look for something, they're going to perch and look around, and then they might kind of jump back up and fly. So that is a super important part of how they hunt and also part of their behavior. And lastly, also I kind of touched on this before, but their vision is about 8 to 10 times better than our own vision. So this is really a big part of being a bird of prey. So you may already know a couple birds of prey, and you may ask all the time, like your friends who may know birds, or maybe you're part of a birding group, and you might see this very commonly asked in those groups, like, what is this bird? And you know, these are usually the answers that people give. So one of the biggest ones is the red-tailed hawk. I'm pretty sure everyone knows this one or has seen it before. They're the most common hawk, so you'll be able to see them pretty much anywhere you go in the country. Then we've also got our bald eagle. So most people know the bald eagle just because it's a national symbol, but also they have that very recognizable bald white head and tail feathers, so they're really hard to miss, and they're very easy to identify. And then we've also got our turkey vulture, which I can't tell you how many times somebody will think it's an eagle or something, but I'm like, no, unfortunately, that's just a turkey vulture. And the biggest way to tell that is because they have these darker kind of armpits and wrists, so these arms, and then the primaries and secondary feathers are going to be lighter colored. And when we are talking about our bird of prey families, we'll just kind of go through each one by family. So when we're identifying them, it's a little bit easier to kind of get a grasp on, I mean, I guess to narrow down what you're looking at. So if you're not sure, maybe you know it's a falcon, but you're not sure which falcon, at least you know it's in the falcon family. So actually, my camera's in the way, I think. So this is a pretty good, I guess, picture that I love to use. Let me turn on the thing. Okay, so this is what I love to use to kind of talk a little bit about the silhouettes that are super important in being able to identify a lot of our different birds of prey. So we get our birds of prey who are like up here. These are our vultures. So vultures are going to be larger. They're going to have, like I said, that lighter color on the primary and secondary feathers and the darker color through the rest of the body. And their wings kind of fan out and they have a very short tail. So that's the best way to identify them. Then you get your eagles, which are going to have these primary feathers with a lot more space between them compared to maybe like your buteos or harriers, which don't have as much space between them and they kind of fan out as well. Then we get our Buteos, which are like our hawks. We'll go over all of these together. They're a lot chunkier, so they've got a chunky tail, a chunky head, and they're not as long as a wingspan. It's more circular. And then kind of going down to our falcons and occipital hawks. Falcons are going to have more of a V shape or an M shape on their body when they're spread out in flight. So they're very aerodynamic. And then our occipital hawks are going to kind of also have a very long tail with shorter feathers. So not as wide as the Buteos. But okay, so that kind of goes over those things. And so we've got our occipiters. So those are going to be hawks, eagles, and harriers. So the Occipituridae family. Then Pandionidae family, which is the ospreys. Falconidae, which is falcons. And then last is the Catharidae, which is New World vultures. And the reason why I put debated is only just because technically they're not really a bird of prey in terms of their behavior. They don't predate birds like our other birds do. They are mostly going to be scavengers. So they will look for birds that are already decaying, or well, not birds, but just meat in general that's already decaying or, you know, already dead. And this is how they scavenge. But they are very closely related in terms of certain behaviors and also just in terms of their physical traits. So we could kind of group them in together, but it's a little debated. So we'll go through these one at a time. So we have Occipiter family, but we got the Buteos. So we talk about Buteos. This is like the RedTail Hawks. So RedTail Hawk is the most common raptor in North America. So this is going to be the raptor that you see pretty much everywhere. And I can guarantee that 90% of the time when you see a raptor, it's most likely going to be a red-tailed hawk, unfortunately. I mean, not unfortunately, they're super cool. But sometimes, especially like for me, sometimes I've been birding for a while and I just like really want to see a new hawk sometimes. So it's a little disappointing when you think it might be a hawk you've never seen before, but it's just another red tail. But they do occupy a really wide range of habitats all over the state. So they're seen everywhere pretty much. They're generalists in terms of diet and habitat. They usually will be seen riding updrafts. So usually the ones you see circling in the sky, look for those red feathers on the tail, and you can tell that that's probably going to be a red-tailed hawk. They have this classic sound that you probably have heard in movies, the like, yeah sound. But usually it's really annoying because it's usually dubbed over bald eagle, which isn't true. So bald eagles don't make that noise. It's the red-tailed hawk. So that is one thing to kind of recognize when you are hearing them. They might kind of shout out to each other. So that's what you're hearing is the red-tailed hawk. And they're also a large consumer of mammals. So this is incredibly important because they are really good at getting rid of pest species, especially on farms and open fields. So they get rid of mice, rats, things like that. But the one thing that's pretty cool about the red tail is that a lot of people try to identify it based on this red tail, but it can also be identified based on this belly band. And it's probably more reliable since our red tails come in a lot of different colors and morphs. So this belly band is always going to be here. You can kind of see it right here when it's flying overhead. So that's the best way to identify it. Next, we've got our rough-legged hawk. So it looks a little bit like the red tail, but there's some pretty key differences. So they only winter in Nevada, so they're not really going to be found here this time of year. But they have these noticeable dark spots throughout their body. So mostly on their wrists and their belly. So you can see on the wrist that they've got these dark black splotches or kind of dark brown color, I guess. And then also they've got these splotches just below the neck. Right on the breast. So that's kind of one way to tell the difference between them. They're going to prefer open country habitats just like the red-tailed hawk as well, but they do need those scattered trees for perching. So one place you might find them is like in sagebrush with scattered pinyon juniper area, or even like meadows with trees lining between the meadows or something like that. Their legs are going to be feathered down to the toes. So that's like another really important part for identifying them. And the other thing too is that they've got this very noticeable beak right here. So this beak is very small. It looks almost like a falcon beak compared to the red tail or any of the other hawks that are in this group. So very small rounded beak. Next, we've got our red-shouldered hawk. So the red-shouldered hawk is kind of interesting because technically, if you look at a range map of it, it doesn't look like it occurs in Nevada, but I've definitely seen some in Nevada. They're usually in riparian areas, so they're right on the California-Nevada border. So if you live like in Reno, you'll definitely see some of these guys up here. But also maybe if you live kind of on these small towns that border on the eastern Sierras, then you'll be able to see them as well. They usually are going to prefer that riparian and forest habitat, so they are a forest hawk compared to the red-tail and the rough-legged hawk. So they are more open country. This guy is forest hawk. And there's a little bit smaller than the red-tail hawk, so noticeable difference between those two. And with them, they also are really shy, so they flush easily. They like to be very elusive. So if you are kind of watching them, try to keep a distance if you want to get a good picture or just to be able to observe them without them flying away. Because if they hear you or they notice you, they might kind of get a little spooked and try to run away. So that's something to remember when you're watching these birds. But the biggest way to identify them is, well, by their name, they got these red shoulder patches from above. From below, you can kind of see that it goes all the way up to their neck and that it continues down their breast. And they've got some light barring on the breast as well. Then on the back, they've got these striped tail feathers and also the striped primary and secondaries on their wings. So pretty noticeable and pretty easy to spot from both the front and the back, above and below. Very noticeable. So next we'll get into our eagles. So we have two species of eagle that occurs in Nevada. So we've got our bald eagle, and everyone loves and knows the bald eagle very well. But they usually will winter in Nevada, so they're going to have some permanent breeding pairs here. I know up in northern Nevada around Washoe Lake or even Lake Tahoe, you can definitely find those permanent breeding pairs that are there year-round. But they're going to be wintering all over the state in the rest of the year, in the rest of the state in the winter, they'll be wintering here. So they do mate for life, and they're going to create really large nests over a lot of years. So they return to the same nest every year and add more to it. So this is how you get these nests that are like 10 feet wide and 6 feet deep. So once you do spot a nest, they're really easy to identify that that is an eagle nest. And specifically, the bald eagles are usually going to prefer a habitat near water, preferably a forested habitat. So you'll see them in mountains where you might have rivers nearby or lakes, kind of these alpine habitats too, is where they're going to be mostly. And they have a pretty big fish diet, and they sometimes will steal fish from other birds, which is a pretty interesting thing to kind of understand. And with the bald eagle, they're often confused for golden eagles, especially when they're in their younger plumage. So it can take about 5 years to develop that bald plumage that you know. So this is a pretty good, here, I'll move this a little bit. Yeah, so this is a pretty good look at how they develop their bald plumage. So the first year or so, they almost look exactly like a golden eagle because they have this brown head. They don't have their white feathers yet, but the biggest thing is that this black part of the beak goes all the way up to the base of the beak right up here. So that's a pretty good indicator, whereas the golden eagle maybe only has it like on the tip where they got this black. The other thing is that their eyes are going to develop this kind of like bright yellow color over time, and they're going to get more remodeled as time goes on. So you almost might think of it as like a dirty bald eagle, I guess is what you might call it, when they get to their 2.5 to 3 years or so. They look kind of dirty, like they've just been like putting their head in the mud. So that's how you know that of roughly their age until they get to their definitive adult plumage, which is usually at about 5 years. So now we've got our golden eagle, and you can already kind of see those differences that I was talking about. So the black doesn't go all the way up to the base of the beak. They're going to have kind of a golden nape on their neck, and it's going to be more of this like very established, not as peaked of a head. So when we kind of go back, they've got a little bit more of a peak on the top of their head, whereas this one kind of just goes straight into it. But they are the largest bird of prey in North America, maybe only like a few inches longer in wingspan than the bald eagle, but still bigger. And it's named for its golden nape, so it's kind of hard to see. That's what it like on most golden eagles, you can't really tell super easily unless you're looking right at them, but they do have a little bit of this light brown golden coloration right here that you can tell where they get that golden nape color from. And then the juveniles are going to have white patches over the base of the primaries and the tail. So they're going to have like kind of speckled white splattered all over them, which is a little bit of a difference from the juvenile bald eagles. And they can take on really large prey items. So coyotes, cranes, foxes, things like that. And one thing that's pretty cool about them is actually in Mongolia is where they originated as a kind of a hunter species for Mongolians. And so they are falconers, basically use them for hunting. So that was kind of where they started this mutualistic relationship with humans, but generally they prefer areas away from human development. So they're less likely to be seen as bald eagles because they don't really like to be in areas of heavy development. So now we'll kind of get into our Harriers. So we only have one North American Harrier species, and it's the Northern Harrier. They usually migrate to Canada, but they can be found year-round in most of Nevada. So just keep an eye out for them year-round. And generally, they're going to fly low over grasslands or wetlands. So the best place to find them, because they do hunt those species that prefer riparian habitats, so mice, muskrats, lizards, things like that, that like to be in wet habitats, they fly low and they will attack, like they'll kind of just fly over and jump right down. And one thing that's really recognizable and really unique to this hawk is its facial disc. So you can kind of see it has a little bit of a facial disc right here. Also a little bit noticeable from the side in here. And it kind of makes them look like they have an owl head. And this is to funnel sound into their ears and also to funnel their sight a little bit. So it's easier for them to see. They also have this really noticeable white rump patch. So when they're flying low and they're kind of dipping up and down, it's really easy to catch that white patch and then you'll be able to identify that it's a Northern Harrier, which is probably the best way to identify them. But here is a close-up of that facial disc. So you can see that those feathers are a little bit of a different pattern right around the facial disc and that it's usually bordered by like a light brown or white color. All right, so then we'll get into our last group in this family for the occipiters, the true occipiters. So we have a couple species of true occipiters. So we've got the Sharpshin Hawk and the Cooper's Hawk, which look really similar. So I'll be talking about them a little bit comparatively. So the Sharpshin Hawk is the smallest hawk in the United States. So if you compare that to a Cooper's Hawk, it's very apparent the difference. They're going to occur year-round throughout Nevada, so you'll be able to see them in most habitats, but they do prefer the dense forest. So look for forests in mountainous regions or even like the Eastern Sierras for those breeding habitats that they might be in. They're surprise hunters, so they really love to kind of ambush their prey very surprisingly. They will wait until the last minute if possible to jump on them, just so that the prey thinks that they might be safe, but they're not. And the biggest difference between them and the Cooper's Hawk is that they have a square tail. So you can see that there's a very sharp edge on this tail. It's very square. And when I show the Cooper's Hawk, you'll definitely be able to see the difference. But this is an adult up here. So you can see that with the adult plumage, they've got a red eye. They've got this kind of like dark gray color on the back, dark grayish brown color. They've got a barred tail. And also they've got lightly barred breasts that's kind of like a light orange color. This is a juvenile where it's more streaky. So it's not this barred color yet. And they're about J-sized. So if you kind of want perspective, think of like a scrub jay. That's about the size that they are. So they're really small. And then we've got our Cooper's Hawk. So you can see that there is quite a similarity between the two. The biggest difference is going to be kind of like this tail right here. So you can see it's not square, but they occur year-round throughout Nevada. So also in a lot of the similar habitats, so usually woodlands or well-shaded suburbs, so suburbs with a lot of trees, they'll usually be there. But they're also a bird feeder stalker, which means that you will usually see them hanging out by your bird feeder if you have one, or if you have a neighbor with a bird feeder, they'll post up on the fence near it and you might see all of your birds fly away. Try to look around for a Cooper's Hawk. That's usually going to be who's hanging out there. The other thing, like I talked about, is that round tail that they have. So you can see super round compared to the flat square-like tail that the other one has. So I think somebody had a question. What about kestrels? Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be covering kestrels in a second here when we get to the falcons, but they do look really similar. So you can kind of tell that there's like that orangey blue color. So there's a big difference between them, and it'll be a lot more obvious when I kind of show you the kestrel. Okay. So then the last true occipiter that we have is the northern goshawk. So the northern goshawk is going to be found year round throughout most of the state, but they usually prefer kind of like old growth forests and habitats near body of water. So when we say old growth, these are going to be forests that are not really emerging so much. So, you know, you do see a lot of pinyon juniper forests that are emerging more and more. So they won't really be there. But if you have these really old pinyon juniper forests that have always been there, and they've been there for like hundreds of years, or even like the Eastern Sierras where these pine conifer forests, they're going to love it there. They do like some sagebrush habitat, but they're more likely to be in these forest habitats, but you can also see them in sagebrush. But the interesting thing about them is they probably have one of the largest ranges of prey items next to the red-tail hawk. So they can eat pretty much anything, which is pretty cool about this species. Oh, and kind of going over, I guess, their basic identifiers. They kind of have this slate gray color all over their back with a white eyebrow line and red eyes. And they have this light gray and black barring on their chest and all the way down to their talons. So it's pretty cool. They're really beautiful birds, in my opinion. So then we get our Pendionidae, which is our osprey. And we only have one species of osprey here. It's just the western osprey. And there's only really two species in their family. So it's kind of interesting that they're kind of a lone wolf in terms of their family. There are only two in their family. So they breed along the Eastern Sierras and migrate through the rest of Nevada. So if you live along the Eastern Sierras, or if you frequent that area, you'll definitely see some osprey around water, on perches, any kind of trees that have open canopies. So maybe dead trees or trees that are kind of like losing a lot of their leaves, you'll find them there. So they like conifers, open fence posts, stuff like that. They're mostly going to be eating fish. So their diet comprises of 95% mostly of fish. So they're going to need to live near water. So most of the time, wherever their nest is, usually a water source is within like a quarter mile of it. It's not going to be that far. And they can be found near large lakes and rivers. Like I said, they're just going to build their nest right offshore. And one funny thing about them is they clash a lot with bald eagles for food. So when I said bald eagles steal food, they usually steal it from the osprey, who are really efficient fishers. They can catch, I think, 4 to 5 fish an hour. So they are very good at what they do. I think we had a question. Let me check on it. Oh yeah, there we see these in Lake Tahoe. Yes, so one of my favorite places to go and see osprey is Lake Tahoe, especially in Emerald Bay. There are tons of osprey over there. I think I did an osprey nest survey one time, and I think we found like 8 breeding pairs of osprey just in Emerald Bay. So there's a ton of them there. So I would suggest if you live in Northern Nevada and you really want to see this bird, definitely go and check out Lake Tahoe for them. All right, so now we're getting into falcons. So we've got 4 falcon species, the largest being the peregrine falcon. So it's the largest of the North American falcons, but they migrate through Nevada, and they have pretty scattered year-round populations, mostly going to be in the Sierras, like I said. So they kind of prefer that habitat because they need those open landscapes with cliffs. So they really prefer high elevation areas, or they prefer areas that have ravines or canyons nearby. And that's going to be where they're at for like mostly nesting. And one thing that is really cool that a lot of people probably already know about the peregrine falcon is it's one of the fastest birds in the world. It can reach 70 miles per hour on an ambush dive. So this is why they also love those cliffs, because they can get a lot of really good speed jumping off of a cliff, going down into a ravine or a canyon, and being able to ambush prey. And just the sheer force of that speed will knock a prey unconscious. So it's really a good tool for them to be able to use. But overall, they're going to be more bluish gray color. So you can see on them that they have this really like thick mustache stripe. And then also it goes all the way down through their head. They have a white kind of barred breast, and that goes all the way down to their talons. So when we compare with the prairie falcon, they do look a little similar. The biggest difference is that they're obviously more of a brown color, and they have this very small mustache stripe on their face that is compared to the peregrine falcon is very small. But they're the second largest one, so they're a little bit smaller than the peregrine falcon. They're found year-round throughout Nevada. And part of their habitat that they prefer is usually open meadow or sagebrush habitats. So that's where you'll find them. They're going to be slightly smaller than a peregrine falcon, like I said, and they're usually very playful. So one cool thing to observe about them is that you might be spending a lot of time tracking them down in their binoculars because they love to just fly around really fast. They love to toss things around down to the other falcons. So prairie falcons will typically play with each other. They'll toss things to each other in the air. It's pretty cool. So if you do see that behavior, it's really fun to watch. Then we got our Merlin. So our Merlin is the second smallest. It's found in the winter here in most of the state. And the habitats are usually like grasslands and open forest that it prefers because it kind of needs to perch. But it'll typically take over magpie and crow nests, which is kind of interesting. It's a lot smaller than both of those birds, but it loves to take over their nests. And it usually will do this in areas of more human development. So it prefers to be in those regions because it'll find those nests much more easier. And usually they'll hunt in pairs. So Merlins are very good at hunting together, and they hunt birds. So they are going to be pretty strictly bird eaters. They might eat smaller mammals or lizards and stuff like that, but they'll hunt down flocks of birds. One of their favorite, I guess, prey items is waxwings, and this is mostly because of how they gather in really big flocks together. So they're really easy to kind of just swoop in and try to grab at least one of them. So then we got our American kestrel. So someone's asking about the American kestrel. It is the smallest falcon that we have here in Nevada. So it is found year-round throughout the state. And it could be found in mostly these open sagebrush areas. So I usually typically find them, yeah, kind of out more in the hills or in like sagebrush areas. They do occur kind of near development, but usually on the outskirts of town. So they're not going to be very common in town. But they usually need some bigger sagebrush or pinyon juniper for nesting. So they try to nest at least 6 to 8 feet off the ground. But they're a really good predator of insects. So they're going to mostly predate big insects like, big dragonflies or, beetles, moths, things like that. They're really skillful aerial attacks. So they're very swift. And one thing that's cool about them is they actually take over woodpecker holes for cavity nesting. So they are cavity nesters. So it's pretty interesting. Most birds of prey aren't cavity nesters. But when we're looking at them to identify them, you can see they've got this blue and orange color with some black eyebrow, or it's kind of like behind their eye, I guess, a mustache stripe and kind of an eyebrow stripe. And they're blue on the head with a little bit of orange running down the back through the tail, and then blue wings. So they're very colorful birds and really hard to miss. Even with their size, they're really cool, and they're really fun to watch. All right. So our last one that we'll cover is our New World vulture. So we've got our turkey vulture. They are the only ones in this family that occur here in Nevada, but they're a common large vulture that's found across the state. So most of the time you're probably seeing a turkey vulture when you see a really big bird like this flying through the sky. The best way to kind of identify them from other birds is that when they have their wings out, they kind of teeter back and forth on them. So they're kind of doing this uneven, almost like balancing act on the wind. So they're not very, I guess, swift. but they have a really excellent sense of smell to find decaying carcasses. And this is part of the reason why they have a hairless head, is so that they can stick their head in decaying flesh and not get any kind of like parasites or maggots or anything that would hurt their feathers and really decay the value of their feathers. So they don't have any feathers on their face. But they usually will nest in fallen trees or abandoned buildings. They might take over old heron or raven nests. That's just kind of part of what they like to do. And they'll usually travel back and forth. So they're between areas of high development and low development. So they won't always nest nearby. They will travel many miles just to go to areas where humans are to look for dead food, because, you know, it's very likely that there's going to be roadkill or whatever near roads or in residential areas. So they look to feed in those areas, and then they go to desolate wilderness for their nest sites. So before that, let me check if we got any questions. Would you mind sharing yeah, of course, I can share the prairie falcon slide again real quick. So let me go back to that one. Oh yeah, so if you're looking at the prairie falcon, the other really good thing to go to if you have any more questions after this, we're recording it, so it will be on YouTube. But if you have any other questions about identifying them, allaboutbirds.com is really awesome. It is run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and it's where I get a lot of my information about birds. And they have like the life history facts, identification, all these kind of maps and whatnot. So there's a lot to talk about there. Awesome. So we will go to our identification. So hope everyone's ready for identification test. We'll go there real quick. All right, so it looks like somebody else had a question. So will vultures eat all decaying critters? Will they stay away from carcasses if they have sat out for too long? So yeah, vultures typically have a like sweet spot that they like to hit. So usually it's kind of weird, like they almost won't prefer to eat something if it literally just died. So they want to wait like an hour, a couple hours, but they won't go more than I think like 3 days if it's been out for like 3 days, unless they're starving and really hungry. And this is because there's more likely to be a lot of bad things in it. But the reason why they go after these decaying foods is because, like I said, they have a really strong sense of smell. They can identify those decaying animals really well. So it's very easy for them to be able to find them. Also, they're especially adapted to be able to do it. All right. So we will do an identification test. So kind of the way that this works is I have numbers on these ones. So you're going to tell me which number you think is this bird. So I'll give everyone a second to put in the chat what they think it is. All right, so we got some ones, some threes. 3, 1, 3. So this one's kind of rough. But it's actually the red-tailed hawk. So I don't think anyone really got that one right. I think everyone was saying 3 or 1. I think you guys thought that I wouldn't start off with an easy one, that I'd go straight into being really hard. But the best way to tell is this belly band right here. So it's kind of hard because it doesn't look like it has a very red tail, and it looks like it has a really small beak. But no, this is a red-tailed hawk. So we can see that belly band right here. But good try, everyone. That was a good warm-up. All right. So next we've got this one. Do we know what this one is? I'll move this out of the way. Sorry, I'm kind of my chat is in the way of everyone. I'm sure it comes up as a box on here. All right, so we're overwhelmingly getting ones. So yes, it is a 1, is the peregrine falcon. So you can see that it's got that kind of bluish gray color on the head that kind of goes all the way down, that thick mustache stripe. Very good. All right, so this one's kind of rough. And if you don't get it right, that's okay because we're learning together. It's not very easy. Yeah, so it looks like pretty much everyone is stuck on whether it's a Sharpshin or Cooper's. So it is a Cooper's hawk, and you can tell because of this kind of curved tail where our Sharpshin hawk is going to be more of a boxy kind of flat tail. So that's the best way to tell. It's also kind of hard because it's facing away from us, but honestly, when you're birding in the field, it's never going to be perfect and you probably won't get this good of a picture on it. All right, next is this one. All right, so it looks like overwhelmingly everyone is saying 3. So yes, it is the American kestrel. It's got that blue color, the orange color. It's really cute. That's how I identify them, is that I think they're the cutest bird, in my opinion. All right, next we've got this one. Looks like this one's stumping a lot of people. God, we're all over the place. All right. So this one's actually going to be the Roughlegged Hawk. So it's number 2. So like we said, the best way to tell, they've got this dark patch on the wrists, and also the belly is going to have a dark patch. They've got this really small curved beak. So they're kind of hard because they come in a lot of different colors, but these are always going to meet the same consistent ones as the wrist patches and the belly patch. I think I got like 2 more right here. This one's rough. So I think we all agree it's not a turkey vulture. So it's actually the bald eagle. So they've got that really like thick kind of black that goes all the way up to here, and they're kind of starting to get their plumage. Yeah, so. Although this kind of does look like a golden eagle, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe the person who gave me the picture identified it wrong. Well, this is the question for the ages. So yeah, we don't know. So you can see that it's really complicated. It's not always easy to know what you're looking at, and there could be a lot of questions. So I did choose a really difficult picture on that last one. So I'm even confusing myself now. But a couple tips for raptor watching. It's not always going to be easy. It might be really hard because a lot of the times that they're flying, even though they're really big birds, sometimes they can be really hard to spot. But I do recommend starting with like bigger birds when you're starting out birding. So like raptors are really awesome to look for and to really just get down practicing identifying them and looking for those different things. So when you spot a raptor, it's best to spot it first and then bring your binoculars up to your eyes as you're looking at it. This is going to be a lot easier than kind of going down, bringing your binoculars up and then trying to look for it. It's going to make it a lot easier to track them. Shape is going to be a lot more helpful than size and plumage. So when we were talking about those, especially when they're circling around above you, when we were talking about the wing patterns and shapes, that's going to be the best way to kind of narrow it down to the family, and then you'll be able to narrow it down to the specific bird based on plumage. So yeah, like a round or a square tail, long extended flight wings, are they V-shaped, those things. Also pay attention to flight patterns. So we didn't really talk about this a whole lot, but for example, like I said, the turkey vultures are going to be generally kind of teetering a little bit. They're kind of like working with the wind. Our falcons are going to be very swift and kind of moving in a more erratic fashion because they're catching things like insects or other smaller birds. So they have to move fast with those smaller, faster things. The RedTail is going to be kind of slowly circling in the sky. So those are all things to think about. Like soaring raptors are going to be a lot more obvious. Yeah, and then you're wondering, how do you document them? So we do have our iNaturalist. So if you want to download iNaturalist, we also have Seek, which is by iNaturalist, and that's more kid-friendly and a lot easier to use. But you can actually play a part in citizen science, kind of like I talked about in the beginning. And on the iNaturalist app, you can just search our Summer Nevada Nature Blitz and to join our project. So anything that you post that's in the state of Nevada after that will just automatically be added to our Nature Blitz project. And to post on iNaturalist, it's pretty easy. So you're just going to click the Observe button, which is going to be the biggest button in the center of your screen on the bottom. Then you're going to select, or you can take a photo. So you can, if you already have some good photos or you want to upload them from a camera or something to your phone, then you could do it that way. And you're going to see this screen, which will ask you, what did you see? So you're going to click on this. Oh. And then you're going to identify the subject. And sometimes with the help of iNaturalist, it can really help you out a lot. So for example, I'll move my thing. So you might have something that they can suggest. So I didn't know what this flower was, so I looked it up, and it turns out it's probably a yellow salsify. So it's visually similar and it's seen nearby. So that's how I know. Then the other way is that the post is going to also show up on the page. So once you identify it and post it, it'll show up on the project page. And that's pretty much all it is. It's super easy. And now you're helping with citizen science. But yeah, are there any additional questions or anything like that? And also you can follow us on our social medias. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We post a lot of our information and events on there. And also if you have any additional information that you would like to get from my email, I've also posted that there as well. But everyone did such a good job. I really enjoy doing the identification quizzes. I think other people enjoy them too. All right, well, if there aren't any questions, I'll go ahead and stop sharing. But yeah, and if you have any questions, usually all of our videos are posted on YouTube within the next week or two. So just keep an eye out on our YouTube channel. It's just Nevada Department of Wildlife for recordings of these webinars. So, and thank you to Amanda for moderating for me as well. All right, have a wonderful evening, everyone.